Okay. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome to Drawing on Nature, Part 2 for middle and high school educators, formal and non-formal. If you joined us last week for Part 1, or if you were on the webinar in November, some of the information today will be a little repetitious, especially when we talk about what Project Wild is all about and the federal junior duck stamp. For those of you who are just coming in, you can type your name in the chat, and we're asking that you go ahead and turn off your video because we're going to need to maximize our screen spaces for Rebekah's art and for the slide deck. We want to give a big thanks and shout out to Blick Art Materials because they have donated supplies today that will be raffled off to a lucky participant. Those materials are worth $100, and if you are the winner, we'll ask that you stay on afterwards or email me or Suzanne Fellows, who you'll meet in a moment, to make sure we have your mailing address so she can send those to you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Fellows to tell us a bit about what a duck stamp is. Suzanne?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I am Suzanne Fellows. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and one of the programs that I get to administer is the Federal Duck Stamp Program. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the duck stamp, it is an added licensing fee that is added on for anybody who hunts waterfowl, ducks, geese, or swans who's over the age of 16. It's part of the hunting fees. In the if I can get the next slide, Mark. In the 1980s, late 1980s, we decided that, you know, it's no fun just having the adults get all the fun drawing. That is how we get the artwork for our stamp. So we entered into agreements with a couple of different organizations and developed the Junior Duck Stamp Program. The whole concept behind the Junior Duck Stamp Program is to teach conservation through the arts. We have a wide curriculum. The stamp program, the Junior Duck Stamp Program, is found in all 50 states, DC, and the US territories. We see about 25,000 students a year who enter the art contest. We make a Junior Duck Stamp. Up in that corner, you'll see a example. And the Junior Duck Stamp sells for $5, and the funds go into the Junior Duck Stamp educational program. We also touch about 300,000 families, educators, and community members through the different events that we do each year. And we can talk more about the Junior Duck Stamp at a later point. Mark.
All right. Many of you are familiar with Project Wild, and many of you have little experience with it, but Project Wild is a national, international pre-K through 12th grade environmental education program. We have training, professional development training for educators. Usually our materials are acquired when you go to those workshops. I'll tell you in a minute how to find out how to get into one of those workshops. The materials, there's 4 main publications: the terrestrial guide, the aquatic guide, Flying Wild about migratory birds, and Growing Up Wild, our early childhood curriculum. This slide, which you'll have access to later when I send out the links, spotlights a few of the activities in Project Wild and Flying Wild that have really strong art connections. And speaking of Flying Wild, we are about to launch let me come back to that point. I wanted to throw this little promotional offer out. You can buy the Flying Wild guide online without attending the professional development. And right now we're having a sale on it, $5 off. And if you go to fishwildlife.org/Project Wild, or you can Google the Project Wild online store, it'll take you there. You can purchase this guide. We also have the Flying Wild online professional development course we're about to launch. And that's the point I was about to make earlier. This is ideal for educators in 4th through 8th grades. It takes about 8 hours or less to complete. And during soon, maybe next week or late February through March, we're asking people to try it out at no cost. And when you get to the end of the course, there's an assessment form. You give some feedback to us. You let us know how it went for you. We ask you a bunch of questions. And then we send you a certificate for having completed the course. So we're looking for people to test and review the course. I've asked Kelly to put that link to sign up for that in the chat, and I see that it's there. So you might want to copy that and paste it, or at the end of the webinar, you can use the little dots at the bottom of the chat box to copy all of the chat and then find it later. If you sign up for it, you're not obligated to finish, but please don't sign up for it if you don't think you can dedicate about 6 to 8 hours during the month of March to finish it. Just a few quick screenshots of what you'll see if you do decide to take that online Flying Wild course. It's in the Moodle platform. Okay, and now if you want to take Project Wild professional development training the traditional way, face-to-face, you find your state Project Wild coordinator, and to do that, go to projectwild.org and look for the second yellow button there that says Get Training, and that'll help you connect with your state Project Wild coordinator. All right, now I'm going to jump ahead. All of these slides are from last week, and I'm going to keep them all in the same slide deck. So when you have access to this later, you'll have the whole kit and caboodle from part 1 and part 2. And now I'd like to ask Suzanne to come back on to introduce Rebekah, who's been waiting very patiently.
Great. So Rebekah Knight was our 2006 Junior Duck Stamp winner. When she aged out of the junior program, she started entering the federal artwork program. In 2017, she took second place in the contest. She is a featured artist in the 2016 $1 Million Duck documentary. In the 2022 stamp, she will be providing the artwork, which is part of our design and information on the other species besides waterfowl that are important for conservation through the duck stamp dollars. She exhibits at several acclaimed wildlife art shows, including the Easton Waterfowl Festival in Maryland. And she has interned with the Federal Duck Stamp Office. She is currently on the board of the Duck Stamp Friends Group. She is a rural mail carrier, a photographer, a creative writer, and a pilot. And yet she still makes time to mentor and teach other artists and to serve as a judge for the Junior Duck Stamp program. Very pleased to have you all work with Rebekah Knight. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rebekah.
And Rebekah, before I turn it over to you, I wanted to let people know that I have a Zoom spotlight on Rebekah's easel, and you might want to work the controls on your Zoom screens if you want to make that larger. There will be times when we switch back and forth where I spotlight Rebekah's easel or I share the slide deck. So right now I have the slide deck shared, and Rebekah, if any time we want to ensure that everyone can see your easel very clearly, just let me know. And on that note, please take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate all you guys coming on and doing this. It really means a lot. And first of all, I do want all of you to ask questions. I really appreciate questions, and I really appreciate any comments or anything you might want to add. You can just ask your question, and then Mark will try to get that to me. So to start out, I have a ton of things to go over, and I probably won't get to all of it, but I'm going to try to hit the high points. And the first thing I kind of want to go over is just about the importance of sketching in general, sketching wildlife. It is one of the best ways to learn. If you've ever bought an appliance or something and you look at the manual and there's obviously drawings in the manual that helps explain everything. So it's kind of the same way with sketching. And there's actually a quote I wanted to read out of this book. It's called Field Notes on Science and Nature. I don't know if all of you can see that. It's kind of an interesting book, but this quote is by Jonathan Kingdon. And it says, the probing pencil is like the dissecting scalpel seeking to expose relevant structures that may not be immediately obvious and are certainly hidden from the shadowy world of the camera lens. So I thought that was interesting, comparing that to the scalpel of a knife and like dissecting and learning all the little details. Sketching is very much like that. So I don't have, let's see. Just trying to look over my notes here. Mark, can you put an example? The first slide, I think, is the muskon picture.
Yes, I have that up
Okay,
now.
so I also wanted to mention, okay, thank you. So I also wanted to mention that there's kind of two different ways of going about sketching. You can sketch for the purpose of study, or just to kind of tell a story from something like an observation or, you know, an event that you observed. So on the left, you can see this wasn't sketched from life, but it was from an experience that I had. And it's not super detailed or anything, but, you know, you can learn a lot and just, you know, retain that memory of that experience from just sketching a certain scene, like from photos you take of that scene, which is the case on the left photo. And then on the right, this is more of a study for a painting where I was trying to learn like just the different details of the doll sheep so that I could better understand my painting. So it generates, you can take that slide down if you want. So sketching generates curiosity in how the forms relate to the function of the animal. So for example, like birds and their bills and how they relate to their function, like how they feed. You see that a lot, especially in waterfowl. And like for one example, I did kind of notice how birds, the bird species that are monogamous, where they have only one mate, their plumage is identical between male and female, whereas the ones that pick different mates the males have much more flashy plumage. And I'm sure that you could learn that on the internet somewhere, but that's just an observation that I made just from sketching and drawing these animals, and something that I just learned just from observation. So those sorts of things are really good examples. And of course, it inspires us to spend more time outdoors. So, but I'm going to move on to the sources for sketching. I'll kind of integrate more ways that you can learn from sketching, but for the sources, you can either sketch from life or from photos, but you have to know kind of where to get the wildlife to sketch. So whether you're doing photographing them or drawing from life, you can sketch from wildlife refuges. You can go to different public lands, national parks, conservation areas, places like that, or even your own backyard. So there's actually a good app that you can get on your phone. It's called On X, and it's kind of a hunting app, but it will actually show on a map where all the public lands are. So that can be kind of helpful in determining where you want to go to find wildlife. But you can also sketch from life or photography from animals in zoos or captive animals, aviaries, aquariums, but you do want to be familiar with the differences between the captive animals and the wild ones. Captive animals tend to sometimes not have as good a condition, and their coat is different. Sometimes birds' bills grow different because they're being fed different diets and things. So you do want to kind of be aware of those differences.
Rebecca, a question for you.
Yes.
Can you, the app that you mentioned, is it ONX?
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. So let's see. And then there's also just collecting objects from out in the wild. And Mark, I think you were wanting to talk a little bit about what you can and can't keep, because that's kind of important if you're going to be collecting objects such as antlers, turtle shells,
Right. Yes.
feathers. I thought that might be a good time for you to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yes. As we I said in last week's webinar, for those I hope you remember, for those of you who joined us last week, for most bird species in North America, they are protected under federal regulations that prohibit the collection of their feathers. And so feathers are a popular subject for art, for sketching, for nature journaling, and you're welcome to to pick them up, to sketch them, but you can't keep them, you can't take them home. So those laws are in place to protect those species. It helps ensure that people don't resume hunting them for their market value. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. So with that said, wild animals in the wild, captive animals, either from life, photography, whatever, there's plenty of opportunity in places to get wildlife reference for your sketching. So let's talk a little bit really quick about just photo reference versus drawing from life, because they're both actually really important. And there's pros and cons to both. But for photos, the biggest pro for photos is obviously going to be you have a lot of time to sit there and look at the details and look at everything, and it never moves. So you can study everything about that one photo of that subject that you're drawing. The con to photos is you're not going to get the movement, the behaviors, and things like that. And sometimes photos can be distorted a little bit depending on what lens you use and things like that, which I'll talk a little bit about in a while. But so that's kind of an overview of photos. Now with sketching from life, the pros to sketching for life, obviously, that you get a lot of the movement from the animals, you get the behaviors, you even get sounds and other information that you can actually observe that sort of completes their character that you can convey into the drawing. The cons to sketching from life is that they typically don't sit still for you if you're drawing animals that move a lot. So you kind of have to be quick, and you kind of have to have a good foundation of the animal's anatomy structure overall. But I think it's good to be able to do both and have experience doing both, because working from that photo reference that's going to help you develop a bigger foundation for like anatomy and things like that, and a foundation for sketching from life. Because I feel like sketching from life might be a little bit more challenging because you do have to be quick, but you also want to be accurate. So with that said, move on to my next page here. We'll talk a little bit about drawing fundamentals, because before you can draw wildlife accurately, there are some fundamentals that you do have to know just about drawing and art in general. So two major things that come to mind for me are anatomy and perspective. So with anatomy, that's super important. You don't have to know everything about the anatomy in the animal, but the major things like the major bones and where the main joints are, and you want to try to relate those parts to the different parts of your own body. So for example, on a bird, you want to know where their elbow is. And it helps to look at, pictures of anatomy for birds. But I think I do have a slide for this, Mark, if you want to put up the deer. Well, that's actually a good book, by the way, if you go back to I've got it here in my stack, but this book can be very helpful if you guys are interested in a book and that you really want to kind of dig in and learn more about animal anatomy. But the basics are, Mark, if you go back to the deer one, I don't remember. Yeah, right there. So this is a drawing I did, and I just included the important things about the skeletal structure. And the red areas are going to be the main joints that you want to know. And every animal, I suppose vertebrate animal is going to have these same joints, including birds. So you want to be able to relate where those are. So let's see. You just want to build this sort of educated mental picture of the animal. And once you kind of have a good sense of the different major parts of the anatomy, then you'll be able to sketch much easier. With birds, Mark, if you want to go to the bird studies sketch. It's kind of like that one, only it was, there we go. So there's some different things about birds in particular that are good to know if you are sketching birds. The wing and the feather patterns, I would say the feather patterns are more important than the skeletal structure, because you don't usually see the skeletal structure in a bird because they have so many feathers. So you really want to learn the feather patterns. And at the bottom, I kind of drew out a little diagram of the wing of a duck. And there's a certain number of feathers on the primaries and on the secondaries, and then the different wing, the different groups of the wing. And that's called the, what was it called? The wing formula, feather formula, something like that. There's some other common markings you'll see, like on the hen duck, the head drawing up there. You have eye stripe, the laurel stripe, and you'll see these in different species of birds, but they're pretty common. So it's just kind of nice to know and kind of be able to predict these different markings. And then the same with falcons, they'll have the malar stripe, which is that dark stripe going down the side of their head. So, and then there's obviously the body structure of the duck with the different feather patterns. So I'll let you guys kind of, if you can see the writing in there, take a look at the different parts of the bird. But I did want to throw that in there because they are quite different from the like deer and other vertebrates that walk on 4 feet. So, so that's pretty much all I have to say on anatomy. I know it sounds like I'm blowing through everything really quick, but it was a lot of stuff and I want to get to the actual technique. So if anyone has any questions on animal anatomy, please let Mark know. I'll be happy to answer any questions. But if not, we'll talk about perspective real quick. And Mark, if you want to put up the next slide, should be the perspective. There we go. All right, so this is kind of important to know no matter what you're drawing. But I see a lot of kind of mistakes among like, you know, younger people when I'm with the experience that I have teaching younger people. You really want to keep in mind your perspective, and you can get really in depth with this stuff, but just for the purposes of sketching wildlife, just understand what perspective you are, from what perspective you're looking at the subject you're drawing. So you have 1 point, 2 point, where you can see there's 2 points at the horizon line called the vanishing point. So all lines are going to converge at those points. And then there's 3 point, and you can see it increases the 3D appearance the more you include that perspective. And then there's 4 point, where you kind of have more of a fisheye view. So to put it in perspective, we actually see in 6 point, I believe, where you have a vanishing point directly in front of you, behind you, to your left, to your right, and from the top to the bottom. That's how we see the world. But the reason we don't see everything in a fisheye view is because I believe our eyes are about the same as a 55mm lens. So there's not as much distortion. I hope that makes sense to you guys, but it does have a lot to do with sketching, especially if you're using photographs, because photographs can distort. So if you're using a very long zoom lens, it'll make things appear flat. And if you use a really wide lens, it'll make things appear fisheye. So the least amount of distortion is about 55mm. But that's really all you need to know. But I would highly suggest, you know, if you're educating, then get, you know, have a good foundation and just kind of review your perspective a little bit more, and that will really help. So, oh, also, Mark, let's move on to the next picture. I wanted to demonstrate, there we go. It might not be the most savory subject, but it is nature. And, but I picked this drawing, this sketch, to illustrate perspective, because you can see that the antelope's head is very close. So it's much larger than everything else in the background, and everything kind of points to an imaginary vanishing point in the background. So I just wanted to kind of put that into a picture so you guys can see an example of that. So I think that's really all I had to say about perspective. Oh, there's one more thing on perspective, and that is ellipses and circles. And I don't have an example, but Mark, if you want to put the screen on me and I'll show an example of something that I commonly see. Okay, just a second here. Okay, does everybody see just me?
Yes.
Okay, because I see everybody else. I don't, mine's a little different, but it's okay. I'm trying to get me on the big screen so that I can make sure you guys can all see what I'm doing. So this is kind of a big thing that I see a lot, especially judging the junior duck stamp. And people paint birds, kids paint birds in the water, and there's ripples going around it. Keep in mind with your perspective that there are planes of geometry. Okay, so if you're looking at a bird and it's kind of like you're looking right at it down at its level, then the ripples coming around it are going to appear more flat. So okay, and let's say you have a bird here in the water. This is just kind of a close-up view. Really, really simple. So this is fairly accurate, but so you want to just keep in mind that plane of geometry and make sure that you don't have a line, you know, coming around like this. I do see that a lot. But yeah, just definitely something to keep in mind, refer to reference, and make sure that the perspective that you're looking at the bird is the same as the water that it's sitting on. And you also want to make sure that you know where your horizon line is. And the horizon line is always going to be at your eye level. If you're drawing from life or sketching from life, your horizon line will always be at your eye level. It's a little trickier with photos because the photo could be looking down on something. But you do want to just keep in mind that, you know where your horizon line is, and that'll help a ton because we're trying to make things look as realistic as possible. So that's pretty much everything I had on perspective. So have a good foundation in anatomy and on perspective. And then now we'll get into like the techniques and the exercises and things like that, and actually get into drawing wildlife. And Mark, if you want to interject at any point and let me know where we're doing on time, because we still have quite a bit to cover. So
Yeah,
and
we
of course,
have,
let me know if you have any questions too.
and if you can plan for 20 more minutes, we'll be in good shape.
Okay, I think we're doing fine then. We're about right on track. So what we're trying to do with sketching wildlife is obviously we're trying to learn, but the best, you also want to be really as accurate as you can, because you are going to be looking back on these and you want it to be accurate. So you want to try to create a 3D image on a 2D piece of paper using your drawing tools. I like to use, for your drawing tools, I like to use a toned paper. Works really well because you can do darker, you can push the darks, and then you can also add light to sort of, pull the lighter areas and push the darker areas. White paper is fine too. You can use white paper. But for the tools, I like to use graphite pencil is great. You can choose whatever, softness suits you. Mechanical pencil is also good because you never have to sharpen them. And if you're doing toned paper for the lights, I either use a jelly roll pen or a white pencil for the sort of softer areas. And then if you want to do exercises just for drawing lines, I like these black brush pens because it kind of helps you commit. Well, this one's dried out, but it helps you to commit to the line if you use a really bold pen, which is good because you don't really want a bunch of super sketchy lines. It can get really confusing. And then if you want to do watercolor for your wildlife sketches, I really like these pens that has like a little water reservoir in it, and you just brush it into your watercolor palette and you don't have to carry water with you. It's really nice to have. And then of course a kneaded eraser like this is really nice to have too. So those are basically all I use for my sketching. And okay, just a second here. Okay, so yeah, so for the effective 3D sketching, there's or 3D or realistic sketching. That make it look realistic. So we've already kind of talked about perspective. Value is going to be your shading with your lights and your darks, and then your focus is going to be how much detail you're putting into the subject. So the focus will always be the last step. So Mark, if you want to put up, we'll get into the actual steps of sketching. If you want to put up the deer, there we go. All right, so those are kind of the basic steps that I use, and probably that most artists use, especially when they're learning. But the first step is to establish, and that's, I would say, the most important step, because that's going to be your structure and your guide for the rest of the drawing. So if that's not accurate, then it doesn't matter how detailed it is. The whole thing isn't going to be very accurate when you're done. So I do very, very simple lines, kind of just establish the size and establish the basic angles of the legs in this case, the basic size of the head. And you want to really avoid adding details in this step. You want to try to envision before drawing your lines. So once you kind of have something established, then you start adjusting. And at this stage, you can move different angles and kind of move things around and continue looking at your reference until you get the structure as close to your reference as possible. And I might add this, this technical accuracy is best with photos. It's I wouldn't recommend trying this with drawing from life because things move around too much on you. But so for the adjusting stage, you're going to compare angles, the joints proportions. You're going to use reference lines, which, Mark, if you want to put up the picture of the duck, there we go. I didn't know how to describe that picture. So if you look at the one in the middle, I've drawn some sort of hashed lines from certain points on the bird. And these are reference lines, and they're sort of imaginary lines. And you look at your subject, what you're drawing, and you draw imaginary lines and see where things line up in relation to other parts. And use a pretty reliable part on the animal for a unit of measurement. So like the head on a bird is a great unit of measurement. So say the body of this bird is about 4 head lengths long. That's a very common way of measuring the proportions. And then also you have negative shapes. If you look at the bird in the middle, there's sort of this triangular looking shape between the wings. And you want to look at the shape on your reference of that negative space and actually draw that negative space in. And that's another way of looking at it. And then measure distances and of course, angles and where things line up. And you just keep looking at that and doing that process over and over again until it looks pretty similar to as close as possible to your reference. And then at that stage, you can also start breaking things down into smaller groups, like feather groups if you're doing birds, or muscle groups if you're doing, another animal. So that's the adjust stage. And that could go on, that's also very important. It could go on for quite a while. But once you're happy with where everything is in that stage, then you can move on to the form. And Mark, if you also want to show, I have a deer jumping slide. Sure. I think it's the next
Before
one.
I do, a question.
Sure.
What did you use to draw the duck perspective examples here?
The ones that's showing?
I think so. That was the question in the chat.
Yeah,
but
actually, the last few slides that you've shown have been done on my iPad digitally with a pencil.
Okay. All right.
And so I just wanted to do that so that you could all see it a little better. It just copies off a little better.
And the one that you have with you, what did you use to sketch that duck on the paper behind you?
This is a newsprint paper, and then I used, this is a piece of charcoal. I just picked charcoal because it shows up really well on the screen. Normally I would use pencil or any of my other sketching tools that I showed you, but charcoal's good too. It's just kind of hard to take charcoal out in the field if you're sketching. I just wanted to show this drawing. This was also done digitally, but I just wanted you guys to see how I included the inner structure of the deer and kind of what that looks like in the sketching process. You know, you can see I've got kind of the basic rib cage in there. I've got the main joints that I talked about earlier. And then I've kind of drawn the outline over that, but you really want to wait until you get the main structure as close to your reference as possible before adding much more detail. So I just wanted you guys to see that. Okay, so moving on. So then we get into form, which means your shading, your lights and darks, and this is what's really going to kind of make it pop and become more three-dimensional. And it also shows a lot more of the textures in the form on your subject that you're drawing. So Mark, you can take that slide down. I think we're done with that one. So with the form, the most important thing to note is your light source. If you're drawing outdoors, obviously it's going to be the sun. If it's overcast, it's not going to be as direct of a light. So you're probably not going to have as, if it is direct light and you do have harsh shadows, you can also use those shadows as sort of reference lines. From a photo or from life, if it's from outdoors. So let's see. One thing I wanted to also point out that you want to remember is like the bounce light on the other side of the object, especially if you have a strong shadow. Mark, there should be another slide up there of an egg, which is kind of a zoomed in from one of the previous sketches. So this, you can see the darkest part is going through the middle, even though the light source is coming from the top. The darkest shadow is going right through the middle of the egg, and underneath you see there's a little bit of a light sort of bounce light. So you can tell that it's not really shiny, but you know, it's smooth enough that you have that reflected light. A lot of times you'll see that on certain kinds of tree trunks that have a smoother texture. So just something to keep in mind too. I wanted to point that out. Okay, so the form. I think a really good thing to have your students do when you're teaching shading is to create a value study. And Mark, you can take that slide down. Is to create a value study. This will be really helpful when you're doing your shading. So I suppose I'll keep this on the same page, but basically you just kind of create a column like this and you divide it into several different sections. And if you guys can't see that, please let me know. I'm trying to keep it bold. And what you want to do is the top one is going to be number 1, and you number them all the way down to whatever the bottom number is. Number 1 is going to be white, and then the bottom is going to be black. And then you just gradually, as you go up, you shade lighter and lighter and lighter until you get to white. So if you do, or have your students do this value study, then they can use that to refer to when they are looking at their reference, and they'll kind of be able to actually visualize, you know, how light or how dark. They'll be able to use that and sort of match it to what they're looking at. It can be very helpful. You don't have to do it, but it can be very helpful. Another good exercise to do is the soccer ball sketch. So or anything that has a semi-smooth texture that has different colors on it. The soccer ball is good because it has black and white patches on it, and then you have a direct light shining on it. So the black part of the ball that has light on it is going to be different than the black that's in the shadow. Even though they're both black, you're not going to draw them both as black. So it's kind of an optical illusion, really, when you actually look at the actual color, like compare the black that's in the light to the black that's in the shadow. They're completely different shades when you go to actually draw them. So that can be a really good exercise for your students. So that's really the main things on form. Just remember with form that you want to actually shade and draw what you are seeing and what the light is revealing to you versus what you think it is, just because it's a black animal of some kind, you know, it doesn't mean that you color the whole thing in black. So just keep in mind your light source. So that's kind of the basic structure for, or the basic, I guess, procedure for sketching wildlife. And not every artist or not everybody uses that method, but you do to some extent in some way. Because I know artists who just go right in and they just start drawing without doing all the structure stuff. They're still doing it, they're just doing it in their head. So that's, you don't have to actually draw all of those things and all of those steps, but that's kind of the way you want to visualize it, is you want to make sure that your structure and everything is, you want to check all of those basic things and work from large to small. So the final step would be the focus, and this is where you get into your details. And it's important with your details that you want to detail the areas that you want to focus in on, or the focal point. That's where you want to do the most detail. And as things sort of recede, or things that aren't, that you don't want to give as much information about, then you don't want to detail that as much. And I don't think I had an example of that, but it's kind of like when you take a photo of something and you like, there's a part of it that's really in focus and then other parts are kind of blurry. It's kind of like that concept. You don't have to detail the whole entire thing. Okay, so does anyone have any, are there any questions, Mark, on anything so far about the sketching process?
Well, I don't know, but I'm going to ask Kelly or Suzanne if you had seen any come up.
The only other question was if we could see step 4 from the deer page again, which I think you are sharing currently, Mark.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different from what I was explaining, because, and that's why I put form/focus, because that final step there in that example is more, you know, you could consider that as being the form stage, because I've added the shading there. And I didn't actually do a lot of detail on that. In fact, I probably, if I was just doing wildlife sketching, I would probably just leave it at that as far as the extent of the detail, because, you know, I just wanted to sort of show the movement of the animal and the animal's character. So there's not really a huge need for detail there. So also you might keep in mind too, like with your students, when you have them draw things from nature, from whatever source it may be, it might be best to start with things that are from simple perspectives and simple views. So a straight on view or a straight like looking down view. More dynamic angles and views can be added or practiced a little bit later, but it might be easier to start with a more simple perspective.
Question from
Yes.
One of the educators: how would you sketch something that is translucent, like a jellyfish?
Oh, well, really, it's just, it comes down to you are drawing what the light is revealing to you and what you are seeing. And for example, well, when you're doing the structure stage of anything that's round, so a jellyfish is kind of round for the most part, you'll just use your basic structure for the shape. And when you're drawing something that is translucent or not, in the develop or the establishing stage, you want to follow through with that shape. And I'll show you an example. Let's see. So we just have a basic sort of egg shape here. And if I draw a line going through the center of it, a center line, and I want to kind of draw the form of this, then you can draw a line going around here, but I'm going to follow through on the other side of this. So it kind of looks translucent. So I'm developing the form of this shape and I'm following through on the other side like this. And you can darken the ones that are on the outside like that. So that kind of gives it a translucent appearance. And the same could be said for boxes too. If I draw a 3D box like this, it's really sloppy, but I can make it translucent by following through with those lines. So you can take that same approach with something like a jellyfish, which would actually be a little bit easier because you can see through and you can follow through with those lines on the other side. You don't have to imagine them. And then you leave those lines there because they are translucent. So this will kind of give you a translucent look if you actually just kind of follow through with that shape and on the other side. So I hope that helps. But when it comes down to it, yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say about 3 minutes to get to a stopping point. And but go ahead.
Okay, good. Yeah, like I said, I got so much, and there are some things I'm not going to get to, but so since we do have only 3 minutes, I was going to do a live 1 minute sketch and kind of, challenge you guys if you have your sketchbooks with you to do a quick 1 minute drawing. But we don't have to do it now, but for your students, it's a really great exercise because if you have a reference that you're looking at, let's say this really works best with photographs, to be honest, but if you're using a photograph, just put the timer on for 1 minute and have your students draw as much of that as they can. And when the timer goes off and you look at it and you can see how much they actually got down on the paper. If they went in and started, drawing, one part of it and went in with all the details, then they're not going through the mental stages of establishing the main size and structure first, and then moving on to detail last. So you want to try to get as much of the big picture as possible in 1 minute. So it's a really good exercise. So really quickly, also, I want to touch on gestures because this is more relating to drawing from life. So if you have a good foundation of your anatomy, your perspective, and just your drawing techniques in general, this is sort of your visual vocabulary that you'll be using for drawing from life. And with that, you can learn to draw more movement gestures and sort of get to know the animal's character, which will teach you a lot about the animal. So Mark, can you throw up the mountain lions gestures sketch here? Okay. So you can see here, there's really no detail and they're not very refined, but you get the sense of movement with this mountain lion. And I kind of used bold lines for the spine and just establish that general line of movement. So you want to maintain that line of movement. You want to use sort of like light sweeping lines. You want to get that sense of the movement of the animal. And I usually, like I said, start with the spinal cord and then sort of build from there. But it's really important that you feel the movement in your pen stroke because that's going to translate into your drawing. So really important for getting that character across. So then another exercise your students can do for gestures, and this is a really great exercise for when you're drawing from life. Let's say you're at a zoo or something and you're out there sketching. You can do a thumbnails exercise, and you can either do this like with a timer or without one. Mark, can you put up the doll sheet thumbnails? There we go. So this is a bunch of doll sheet thumbnails that I did in preparation for a painting, but I was exploring the possibilities of poses, and you really get to know the character of the animal and their behaviors and their movements in a way that a photo can't give you if you're doing this from life. These weren't done from life, but you could easily do this sort of thing from life. So yeah, if you want to do an exercise like that where you try to do as many thumbnail drawings as you can in 1 minute or 2 minutes, 30 seconds or whatever, that can be really helpful in getting those general lines of movement down. So, okay, so that I really just went through everything really quickly. I wanted to cover as much stuff as I possibly could. The only last thing I wanted to maybe talk about was just kind of what to include in a sketch page, in a nature sketch page. And I think the next slide, Mark, you might have is there's a page of, or a picture that I drew of like a black duck. Okay, so this is a typical, what I would consider a good typical sketch page that you can actually learn, that shows that you are learning from what you're drawing. And it's kind of a sketch study page, but I like to do like the main subject that you're drawing, like the whole thing. And then kind of break down the different parts and like do zoom in on the head a little bit and on the wing. I drew a little feather there and kind of explained just the different parts and put lots of notes and anything that might help you remember your observations. And it might be helpful to, you can add other information like, of course, I would, if you're doing this from life, you can add the time of day and the date, of course, location, let's see, anything else that might pertain to what you're drawing. And then also if your students have their sketchbook and some of it's drawn from life and some of it's drawn from photos, it's good to note what is drawn from life and what is drawn from photos, because those drawings will probably look quite different. Mark, the next slide should be some lions. There we go. So the top drawing was done from life and the bottom one was done later that evening. And this kind of goes back to why are you recording what you're recording? Are you trying to study the animal, the details of it, or are you trying to remember an experience or a behavior? So those are two kind of different things. And so you can see in the top one that I did from life, I put the location and the time, and then I noted that it is from life. So normally, if I thought that I just sketched that out of my head or from a photo, I'd probably just throw it away because they're not that good. But I want to keep those if they're drawn from life, because those are directly observed. And those are obviously a lot more important to me, but they help sort of jog your memory from that moment. So, okay, so you might also want to be comfortable, or your students, with only drawing what is necessary and avoiding a bunch of repetitive details. So for example, if you're studying something like an insect or like a butterfly, just draw one wing, you don't have to do the whole thing. And let's see, note if it's a male or female, any behaviors, sounds, footprints, anything that you might find in the area, the elevation. If you're drawing plants, that can be really useful information. Just remember that you are recording information and you're trying to learn from it, and everything that you record is going to be really valuable for you. And it's really good to have those in your sketchbook to look back on and remember. So I've got a bunch of other notes here. If anyone has any more questions on any of this, just please feel free to ask. I'm ready for the Q&A session or any other questions or comments.
All right. Well, thank you. At this point, we're gonna draw the, we're gonna do the raffle and find out who wins the Blick art materials. So let me change the share screen and then we'll come back to questions. So I have, on the left side of the screen, the list of all the participants, and I'm pulling up my random number generator. And it's set for 1 to 349. And those of you who work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies are not eligible. And the first number we generated was 225. And if this person is present, they will win. And 225 goes to Nicole Old. Nicole, are you here? And you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat.
I don't see her name on the participant list.
Okay, so I'm going to regenerate a number. 164 is Jude Griffin. Jude, are you here?
Don't see her name either.
Okay, a lot of people signed up to get the recording, but so we'll just keep going. Okay. Okay, our next roll is 100, and that takes us to Patricia Leon. Patricia, are you here? I heard some noise. Does anybody see Patricia in the list of participants?
Not that Patricia, unless Patricia Alvarez goes by a different last name sometimes.
Okay. Well, we're going to try again. Here we go. 73. That goes to Karina Velas. Sorry, I can't see the whole name.
She's Fish and Wildlife Service.
Oh.
Sorry, Karina.
Next person, 54. Charlotte Hull. Charlotte Hull, are you here?
Don't see Charlotte either.
Okay, we'll keep going. Last time we got it on 2 rolls. 339. Whew. Scrolling down. Rhonda Lehman. Rhonda Lehman, are you here? When these people see the recording, they're going to just scream that they didn't want it. Okay.
No, Rhonda.
I don't see Rhonda.
Moving on. 125. Dana Jacques. We have about 33% of the people who registered on, so it's been bad luck. But Dana,
Is it D-O-N-N-A-N?
D-A-N-A, and then the last name is J-A-Q-U-I-S-S.
Sorry.
Dana.
Nope.
Nope. So Dana. Okay, sorry this is taking so long, folks. 219. Now, I know of the 100 people here, I'm going to get one of you soon. 219 is Shannon Smith. Shannon, are you in the room?
Don't see a Shannon.
Number 1. Okay, it's probably me. No, there's no person assigned to number 1. That's just the top column. Okay, 201.
Katie Goodwin. She's
Katie
another Fish and
Goodwin, are you
Wildlife.
here?
She's Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, so the next one I'm going to roll is I'm going to roll a number, and if that person's not here, I'm going to find the next person closest to that going down. Number 59. 59 is Marcella Stasa. Marcella, are you here?
I am. This
Hey,
is so
hooray.
exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank
Marcella,
you.
before we all hang up, if you could stay on to give us your mailing address, or you can text it to me or Kelly Reynolds in the chat. But we need an address, not a PO box, to where we can send you the supplies, and Suzanne Fellows here will be sending them to you. So thank you, and thank you to Blick Art Materials for helping sponsor this. Okay, let's turn it over to questions and comments. I will say we're at 5 o'clock now, so if y'all need to go, understandable, I'll be here a while. So do we have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or type your questions in the chat. And Rebecca, I can say while we're waiting, we're getting a lot of people saying thank you, fantastic, awesome.
I appreciate that, Mark. And I do wish that, I know I didn't do a lot of demo on the drawing, but I was kind of hoping that my slides that I sent you would sort of illustrate what I was saying, because it takes a little longer sometimes for me to draw things out. But
Right.
hopefully you guys learned a lot from it, and I really appreciate being part of it.
Well, I certainly did.
Yes.
Hi,
What
Rebecca,
if
this
I-
is Meredith. Can I ask a question? I was the one that put the question in the chat about what kind of sketchbooks do you recommend, or journals?
Oh.
Because I tend to use journals that are the half size piece of paper, and then students, I don't think would prefer that size because it ends up never being enough room. So do you recommend giving them a bigger sheet?
Yeah, I mean, that can be helpful. I like to use, I'll show you what I use a lot. This is, I think it's 9 by 12, so you can kind of see how big it is. Plenty of room. This is a toned paper, which is nice. You can use whatever kind of paper you want, but yeah, I would say if you're seeing that a lot with your students having trouble with the smaller size, then sure, go for a larger size. A lot more room to sort of explore and play around.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
All right.
Any more questions?
Do you know of an art school that teaches traditional anatomy? Anne says that anatomy in art school isn't always available.
Well, typically, and I actually didn't go to art school, and I don't really know as far as specific art schools that I can refer you to, but typically if it's just an art school, the anatomy they're going to give you is human anatomy, which is fine. You can relate that to animal anatomy, but I can't think of any specific schools. The biggest recommendation I can give you is a book like the one Mark just put up, which I forgot to mention earlier, but this is a great book. Any sort of anatomy book that is geared towards artists will give you the information that you need without all the other unnecessary anatomy. So this is a good one for birds. This one's a little bit pricey. I think it was like $70 or something, but I think it's the only bird anatomy book for artists out there. And then there's the other one that I showed earlier, the Atlas Anatomy Atlas, something like that for artists. And I've got it right here. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but it's in there somewhere.
Yes, can you hold that up again?
It's called An Atlas of Animal Anatomy for Artists.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's a lot of just your basic, I mean, it is pretty detailed, but it's going to be the things that pertain to drawing.
Okay. And Rebecca, you had
Rebel.
one other book recommendation,
Yes.
which we ran out of time on, but
Yeah. So
I'll
there
put
was
the slide
another
up there
one.
too.
This one. Okay. So yeah, I meant to show this earlier when I was talking about doing gestures and like, especially the little thumbnails. You can do the thumbnails either from life, which is probably the best, but if you can't do that from life, if you're doing this, say in a classroom setting, something like this is a good book to have, Animals in Motion, because it kind of gives you, like you can see on the cover, the animals in all the different positions. Usually they're just from the side, but you can pick a page out of this book and just have your students see how many of the different positions of, say, like a running horse or something that they can do in 1 minute. And that'll kind of help them really look at the angles of the legs and the proportions as quickly as possible. So that's another good book to have too. I would recommend it.
Well, if you have a few more minutes, maybe we'll get a few more questions answered for those still on, and as well as for the recording. Would that be all right, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And Kelly, if I remember correctly, you're going to have to go soon. So if
I'm good, actually. I'm
okay,
good, Mark.
all right. So one question was, what is your advice to teaching beginners? What is the most important thing to learn or teach?
It's kind of hard to narrow it down to one or two things, but I think maybe in terms of just, the process of getting the drawing on the paper, you want to start from big to small. That's kind of the main overall concept when you're sketching anything. Start from big to small, establish that size on the paper, establish basic shape, and then go from there. Because when you start drawing, you're referencing, you need something to reference everything to when you're drawing. You need like a line to compare another line to. You got to get those lines on the paper first, even if they're not perfect. With beginners, in my experience, I haven't done a ton of teaching, but in my experience, I've seen a lot of kids will be a little too heavy on the initial establishing lines. You want to start really light because you're not actually going to see those when it's done. You want to be able to erase those later if you want to. And then, of course, as I said earlier, the anatomy and perspective are two, big things that you want to brush up on and have a good basic understanding of those two concepts. Those are pretty good foundations for a beginner.
Okay, your answer related to 2 or 3 questions that were asked. Here's one from a different angle, and that is, when you start a lesson, do you usually try to set it up with the students having finished pieces of art, or do you just do thumbnails and exploring poses as a lesson?
It just depends. Like I said, I haven't done a lot of teaching, but the teaching that I have done in the past, it's kind of hard to get a finished drawing in one session, especially if you're working with a beginner, because it can take a long time to get there, because that establishing stage is so important to get it right. It could take sometimes hours, just depending on what you're drawing. So I like to start with basics first and, teach those things, and it could take too long for you to get to the finished stage. So you may have to break it up into sort of a series of lessons over several days or whatever. Hopefully that answers your question. But when you're teaching just the drawing techniques themselves, and throw in the different exercises where they pertain to what you're doing. So if you're trying to do like some gestures of an animal, if you're just trying to get an animal's personality, that might be a good time to do the gestures exercise. Or if you're drawing from life, like if you're at a zoo, that's a good time for you to just draw the gestures, draw the basic, structures and shape and the personality of the animal, versus trying to sit there and get every single detail. So hopefully that helps.
All right. Well, I'm thinking we should probably wrap it up at this point. Lots of comments and questions, but I would encourage anyone still on, if you want to save the chat, you can, and I'll make a copy of it as well. And I'll send out a link to that in the recording, or when I send out the link to the recording. And Rebekah, thanks again so much for your efforts with this. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Some of the people asked if you could come back. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay, no, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
And if anyone has any questions, any more questions for me that maybe they think of later, then anyone's welcome to contact me.
Okay.
I'm on. Yeah.
If they go to your website, will they find your contact info?
Yeah, on the contact page, there's just a box where you can email me.
Okay.
You can do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, but I'm also on Facebook Messenger and I'm on Instagram as well. So you can contact me that way too.
All right, great. And I just shared a slide that has your website on it, RebekahKnight.com. Great. Okay, well, I think that should do us for now. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Rebekah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.